Today, I will be discussing how to run Anduro, specifically coordinate for that matter. So one of the things that's really important if you are interacting with the sidechain is you'll very likely need to run what's called like a node implementation or a node. What this does is this gives you access to the state of the chain, aka all of the blocks that are built in this case on the sidechain. A lot of these principles can actually still be applied to Bitcoin Core as well because of the fact that the project that I'm going to be working with, Coordinate, is literally a fork of Bitcoin Core. So if you want to learn how to build Bitcoin Core, you can probably apply the majority of this knowledge as well. So with that said, yeah, the first place you're going to want to start running Coordinate as a sidechain and interacting with it is we have the GitHub repository. What GitHub is a place where we place our source code. So the nice part about this, as well as being able to run it from scratch, is that you can actually audit all the code here. So in this case, we will go to Coordinate. I'm going to turn, and you'll see that there are a bunch of folders. And in these, for example, we'll go down to one of the files that we have. Let's do addressmanager.cpp. It's literally all the code right there. So you can check every bit of it for any problems, or if you want to fix anything that's not done quite right, which I believe everything is, but it might not be. So you can actually like fork this yourself, like copy it, and then make the changes and then deploy it and patch it, and we might accept that as a submission. So yeah, that's one of the really nice things. So with that said, to do this, you basically go to github.com/Anduro project, or just go to, for example, anduro.io. There will be a link to the GitHub repository. In this case, we're going to be running Coordinate today. And so one of the first steps of kind of running Coordinate, actually I'll show you the cheat real quick if you actually don't want to do the full process. To get started really fast, we actually have a ready-to-use public node. So you can actually literally just start doing all the stuff you do normally with a Coordinate node, just by using this as your RPC URL instead of going and building all this. The note about the public node, though it's easy to use and you can get information about blocks, etc., this you don't want to do like with a wallet application, because that means your wallet is public at that point. It's literally shared with everybody. So you can use this to get like a good feel or vibe of like how this project operates, but just don't rely on this. You need to do the process I'm showing you to get the actual node implementation for yourself in a sovereign manner. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do to start running Coordinate is you're going to want to click the code button on the GitHub repository, and there's a nice like basically literally copy URL to clipboard. You're going to move this over to your terminal window, which you'll have to have open, and you'll go git and then clone. What clone means, it literally just means copy everything from this repository, all the source code, into this directory. This process is pretty quick overall, even on the pretty mediocre internet we have here today. And we're already done. Fantastic. So the next thing is you'll want to do, because right now we are in just a regular old directory, you'll notice it creates the Coordinate directory that matches the exact title of the project. That happens with every GitHub repository. You can force the name, but in this case we're just going to leave it by default. We're going to go into that directory here, and then we're going to check the contents to make sure it downloaded everything. And usually, if you're trying to build Coordinate, the most important thing to look for on Linux to see that you kind of got it right, you'll see this green like autogen.sh. And that is a file that's included in Bitcoin Core and Coordinate. And what autogen.sh does is it basically checks your system to make sure you're ready to build this basically executable. Because there are some things that you might need to finish the process, libraries, etc. So to start that process, you'll do like a /autogen.sh. So autogenerate.sh. And this guy here, this does take like about a few seconds to get started. And as a note, I'm going to bring up one really important thing. You can use this with Bitcoin Core as well, but there's a docs directory here. And if you go all the way down, you'll see there's a couple files. There's build.netbsd, build openbsd, build osx, and build Unix. These files are the instructions to grab all of the requirements that you might need for your specific operating system. For example, if you're running Fedora, if you're running Ubuntu, if you're running NetBSD, it'll have basically all of these, like, real quick, here, the specific instructions with the build requirements. So, like in this case, I'll just run this right now, even though I already have these installed because I installed them beforehand, because I'm not going to download 400 megabytes worth of packages in front of everybody. It's going to take too long. So Control-Shift-V, paste that in there. I don't want to type in this password live. We're not going to do this section, but normally you do this to basically download the requirements. So with that said, okay. Once you do autogen.sh, ULS, you'll see a brand new file that just showed up, configure. That means you're now going to build or create the make file. That is how it determines how everything is built, compiled, etc. So /configure. Okay, and basically at this point, this thing's going through and checking your Linux system to see that you have all the requirements necessary to build this, and it'll give you a final report when you're done, showing what actually got included with your build package. Because if it doesn't find things, it'll actually just omit the ability to build it. One example is if you don't have Qt installed. Qt is the library that creates and draws windows on your system. This isn't necessary in my case. I'm not going to be using the graphical user interface, but it won't stop you from building it. It will literally just omit it. It'll say no. We'll get here in a second. It's going a little bit slower than expected, but we're almost done. Okay, and this was what I was talking about when you get done. You'll get like this list of things, and you'll see like it'll say external signer. Yes, that means it supports like a hardware wallet with libraries. It has all the libraries necessary to run it with wallet. That's the one thing you'll want to make sure because you'll want to use that. Should be yes there. Qt-GUI, no, but it'll have all that stuff. As long as basically the wallet is there, you've done enough right to get coordinate built and be usable. If it says no for wallet, just submit an issue on GitHub, and that will probably help you out. So, okay, so now the final step is the make command. What the make does is it takes all this source code, all the code on this side, and puts it into what's called an executable, something you can run. Think of the thing on your desktop that you click. So you just run make. I'm going to do, there's a special way to make it go faster. J2, that means 2 jobs. And runs through all this. If this takes any more than like 30 seconds, I already have a version that I built ahead of time. So I can just go into that directory and show you basically what it looks like if you were to have it already built. And it's normal, occasionally you get these purple warnings. That is just like type errors, or type warnings saying like, hey, this integer could overflow. Over time, those will be pull requested and fixed. Okay, and let's see here. By the way, any questions so far up until this point? Nothing? Okay. And now, by the way, as if any of you guys like do make files, once you start seeing CXX-LD, that means you're getting right towards the end of the build process. So that is usually a really nice sign. But this step does take the longest portion per step because it's actually now creating the final binaries you're going to use to basically run coordinate or build your application on top of coordinate with. Yeah.
I saw that you had a Docker file. Are we able to just...
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so as part of Coordinate, to make it very easy for people to kind of stand up and automate some of these steps as well, we actually created a Docker file. Sorry, the mouse link service isn't great here. But what this Docker file does is if you do have Docker installed, you can basically Docker run, and it'll automatically do all these steps for you and put it inside of a container to use. That will expose also the ports so you can access the RPC as well. Cool, it looks like we are now built. So I'm gonna kind of move this over to the side. And from here, now we will have a directory in the, or sorry, we'll have a file and source for coordinate D. Yep, and you'll see that if after you build in your source directory, you'll have these executables here. Coordinate CLI and coordinate D are the only ones you probably will care about. The CLI is how you interact with it. Coordinate D is the actual coordinate sidechain node. So from here, I'm just gonna go back. And then we're just gonna run it. So /src/coordinate D. And then one very important step at this point, if you're trying to build a coordinate's in an open beta for testnet. By default, it'll try to connect to mainnet. There is no blockchain for that right now. So you'll just do -- test net. I apologize, maybe I made a mistake there. I'm gonna try something else real quick. Uh-oh. Hang tight. Okay. Okay, I'm just double checking here the exact command to make sure I got it right. Huh. Okay. That didn't go well. I'm gonna see if I might have a configuration real quick. Coordinate D. I know why that happens. That was my fault. So as part of the next step I was going to show you how you don't have to type in -- testnet. So in the configuration file, I already had the chain set as testnet. So basically, normally you type in -- testnet on your first run, but if you already have it configured, it will throw like, hey, I'm expecting to run it on this, but I'm not. But when you first boot coordinate D, you'll see that like it's like, hey, like version 26, and then you'll have all your options here. And then immediately after, you'll go down, and it's literally just like downloading blocks at this point. These are all the blocks that we're missing that are going to the blocks directory, and these are the blocks of the coordinate sidechain specifically. And if I expand it a little bit further, you'll actually see the height of the chain next to each block. And so yeah, it's like literally just going through and just dialing blocks. So at this point, you do have yourself a coordinate D node. How much more time do I got, Aaron? Oh yeah, I'm good to go. Okay, cool. Okay, so now you're going to want to probably interact with the node by asking it questions like, hey, what is your version? Get info. Like, what's your wallet? I want to send or receive money to coordinate. Well, that's through the RPC. This is just the server to take the commands. So what you do is you set up a config file next. So I'm going to shut it down. Coordinate D shuts down really quick compared to Bitcoin because there aren't many, like, the blocks are pretty not full overall, and there's very few mempool transactions. So that's one thing that's really nice. So the next thing we're going to do is seed back to our home directory, or CD. And then there's a hidden directory. If you do ls, you can't normally see. But if you go and you cd, and then you do dot coordinate, it'll show up. And so from here, you now have the bitcoin.conf file in the coordinate directory, which we'll rename in source code, but because it's a Bitcoin fork, we are using like the bitcoin.conf naming scheme. And we're going to edit that file because there's some stuff in here we need to set up so that we can communicate with our node from our PC or other computers on the same local network. Or even like if you're using like a VM-based system, you can run Coordinate D on its own virtual machine and then have another virtual machine run the server for the program or application that you need to connect into that node infrastructure. Think of it like a really fancy web server, basically. That's what it is. But it views the blockchain. So next is, I'm going to use Vim. So we're going to .bitcoin.conf. Then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so there are a bunch of different options. And by the way, most of these actually apply to Bitcoin Core too. So if you're like trying to build Bitcoin and you want to know, like, it's really nice because it is basically backwards compatible. So the first one you're going to need to put in there is chain equals test. That means basically run it in testnet. You can also technically do chain equals main or chain equals signet, but those won't have active sidechains built on them. Next is TX index. What that does is that creates an index of all the out points, which then allows you to go into the Bitcoin RPC, and when you do like get raw transaction, even if the transaction's not in the mempool, like a previous block, so it had already been mined, you can take that TX ID and then search for it on the node, and you'll be able to find that transaction data completely. If you don't have TX index equals 1, you can only search through the mempool. The next, DB cache, that means how much cache you're allowing for building the actual database. So as you're syncing, this number you probably can leave alone. You don't need to touch it or even add it on Coordinate, but on Bitcoin Core, you definitely want that number to be much higher. The next thing that actually like really you have to do to build on top of Coordinate, this one, server equals 1. What that means is run Coordinate as if it were an RPC server. Let me send commands in. If you don't have server equals 1, it will literally, you'll download blocks, but you have no ability to actually interact with Coordinate itself. It'll just be a viewer, or like, you can interact with it in one way, the coordinate-CLI, but it's not programmable that way. And then next, the REST interface, you should also enable that. That allows you to basically also make REST calls to it. And RPC bind. What that allows you to do is if you want to connect to the Coordinate node from another computer, this basically says like, hey, listen on every single port on this device for any connection and allow that through. If you are running this in an environment where security matters, you definitely want to bind to the right interface. But for development reasons, I usually leave that as 000. So you go down a little bit more into some of these configuration options here, and the wallet will be the default wallet. We'll go over that in a second. But the other thing you want to make sure you do is RPC allow IP. And what RPC allow IP is by default, even though I'm listening on whatever interface on the host, so whatever network card, Bitcoin Core by default will reject all connections. Coordinate, because it's based on Bitcoin, exact same principle. So you have to allow IP addresses to connect. So if you, for example, want to allow your whole LAN you're on, let's say you're on 192.168.0.1, you would actually do 192.168.0.0, the beginning number, /24. That'll allow every computer on your local network. If you just want to do like I did, the brute force method of just making sure it's going to work, you just do 0.0.0.0/0. That means literally let any IP address from anywhere connect in. That's not a problem in my case. I'm behind a NAT, so we're good there. And then the final setting, you need to make sure you have RPC username and RPC password. These are basically the little tokens you have to pass with your request to Coordinate along with your actual request itself. So extra information, authentication, so that Coordinate knows that you're the desired user. In this case, I'm literally saying like, hey, if I ask you for get raw transaction, I'm going to pass it test and test for username and password so that it knows I'm the authenticated user. Please use better passwords than that though, or combos, therefore. So any questions about that kind of like configuration and how to configure Coordinate to actually run? I'm assuming we're all good here. Fantastic. So we're going to close out of that one. One second. I think my internet just went out. It's completely unresponsive. I think the internet just... Yeah, I think this is, if I can't get it to reconnect soon, because I'm SSH'd in to show this, there will be probably no more kind of part of this demo. At the end of the day though, what you can end up building essentially on top of this, getting this information from Coordinate, you can, for a good example application is like a blockchain explorer. This is the Coordinate version of mempool.space. So what this does is it asks that node that we just built, hey, like what is the status of the current blockchain? And you have a bunch of different pieces of information, like you can gather the hash rate from the chain. So how much of that merge mining hash rate is going toward Coordinate? The number of transactions in the mempool, the fee rates from those transactions, and most importantly, the blocks being built, their heights, etc. So that is the ultimate goal, is to build applications like that. I actually as well built a very small Bitcoin lottery based on a block hash. So what you do is you deposit Bitcoin into the Coordinate sidechain, and every 10 minutes, it will literally look at the Bitcoin block hash, and whichever TXID got the closest to that block hash, it will just give the entire pot to that user. There are all sorts of game theory problems with this, don't use it, but it was my first like, hey, I'm gonna build something real quick on Coordinate for fun. There's also another builder around here, Tidwell, who built a Azteco style application where basically print vouchers with codes, and you could just redeem those for Coordinate BTC, which then you could theoretically convert back into Bitcoin if you wanted, and as you acquired these vouchers. So, yeah, little Bitcoin block lottery, and you can see like I automatically already submitted a TXID in of one Coordinate testnet Bitcoin. And let's see if this is back online. We're good to go. We can continue the demo for the final piece. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into the original directory for Coordinate that we built in, the GitHub directory. Then seed, I think this one's going to be Coordinate demo / Coordinate. And then from here, you can start using the built-in tool to basically start issuing commands to Coordinate. So that would be Coordinate CLI. Okay, yeah, it's done. Thank you guys, I appreciate it. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. If anybody still stays, I can show the final step, but my laptop just, I think, powered down, so. Yeah, sure.
The Wi-Fi just like glitched out. That was weird.